Hello and welcome to another episode of What Happened, the show where we look at various video game and movie misfires. So, without further ado... What happened? Now, the tale of Epic Mickey is actually way more epic, than most people might realize. The genesis of this ambitious project, which sought to marry video games and Disney's almost 100 years of animation together, is filled with odd business dealings, twists of fate, pure old bad luck, and even worse timing. The first stirrings of Mickey and his epicness started way back in 2003, 7 years before the game's actual release. No doubt spurred by the success of Kingdom Hearts, Buena Vista Games were exploring the other nooks and crannies of the haunting, skeleton-filled Disney vaults for more potential video game pitches. Of course, the idea was to wholly own the project without having to annoyingly share profits with another company like, say, Square Enix. And to do this, it would revolve around their flagship character, which was, of course, the MIC to the KEYMOUS motherfucking E. However, one of the core ideas of the game was in the bringing back of Oswald, the lucky rabbit, who would share the limelight with the eponymous mouse. But in one of those weird twists of fate I mentioned earlier, Disney didn't own Oswald, at all, even though he was co-created by Walt Goddamn Disney. The then COO of Disney, Bob Iger, was actually super into the idea of getting Oswald back, and when he was promoted to the CEO of Disney, did so with aplomb. Alright, in an effort to not bore you, I'm just gonna blast through this next part. There was a sportsman, this guy, and he was caught between scream-lording on sports games on 2 different networks. Bob Iger was like, okay, you can have sports guy, but you gotta give me Oswald. I want him real bad. And thus Disney did what they're good at, making deals and buying things. They finally 100% owned the character by 2006, with the next step being to find an outside developer who could tackle the monumental task of creating a brand new world within the Disney universe, celebrating the more obscure side of the animation giant. Enter Junction Point Studios, made up primarily of former members of Ion Storm, which you should know, but in case you don't, Deus Ex, System Shock, Thief, Damn! The most famous of Junction Point's employees was one Warren Spector, a legendary video game creator often compared to the likes of Miyamoto, Kojima, and on top of them all, David Cage. Junction Point was formally formed in 2005, just a year before Disney began looking for potential partners to develop a title, known only then by its codename Epic Mickey. But it just so happened in another of those hilarious twists of fate, Junction Point was already knee-deep in developing a project. Now, this was news to me until I began researching for this video, but it turns out they were working with Valve on a new entry or spin-off for Half-Life. However, once Disney came a-callin' and outright purchased Junction Point, the Half-Life whatever it was quietly cancelled. Yes, a new chapter all about the wonderful adventures going on within Black Mesa, developed by the minds behind System Shock and Deus Ex. Cancelled. That's just so very what happened. Anyway, undeterred, Warren Spector leapt at the chance to work on such a beloved character as Mickey Mouse, and felt the security of being under the Disney umbrella was the best choice for his fledgling studio. Once the concept of the game, a quirkier, more oddball take on Disney source material that had Mickey exploring a world of forgotten characters was established, Junction Point were understandably excited. They began by producing concept art to find the right tone for this new world, which took a lot of doing. Now, some of this early work was indeed the art which leaked well ahead of the game's eventual announcement, and would remain a sticking point for the project until pretty much forever. It was definitely the darkest, most out-of-the-comfort-zone look for a Disney property at that time, and put a certain amount of expectation on the game as a whole. Warren Spector himself explains. That concept art was leaked and was never intended for public consumption. I had the team do that because I needed to know where the line of acceptability was for Disney. What would they be comfortable with and what would they not be comfortable with? The way to find where a line is to cross it, by a lot. Do something really out there, then have them go, no, too far. Then do something a little less radical radical and less radical until, frankly, you get where you want and they don't even realize you've gotten there. This is absolutely something that happens all the time in any creative endeavor, movies, comic books, and especially video games. Artists reiterate on character or environmental design to hone in on the look producers or directors are going for, and push it to either extreme to find that balance. Lamentably, because the most extreme examples of those designs were the ones that got leaked, it led many to erroneously believe that Disney had nixed some already in development version of Epic Mickey in lieu of the final product, something that Spectre vehemently denies. I'm actually not under NDA or anything with Disney, so I can talk about what happened there. The bottom line is that Disney gave me and the team an almost unbelievable amount of freedom to make the game we wanted to make, and the opportunity to bring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Walt Disney's first star, back to the world. The fact that that happened in a game, I mean, think what that says about Disney. Now, with that said, there was still one huge sticking point, the fact that the game was a Nintendo Wii exclusive. Now, while it's certainly true a sizable percentage of the Wii's fan base was of the younger set, or the really older set, oh Shazbut, why, I haven't seen Oswald in years. Exploring Disney worlds and interacting with their characters is something that appeals to a lot of age demos, even ones with gamer tags that look like this. So certainly there were some feathers ruffled about Epic Mickey only being available on a Nintendo console. This attitude only intensified as the 7th generation wore on, as the 360 and PS3 were seen by the hardcore as being more worthy of such an honor. That being said, those aforementioned consoles, as well as the PC, were initially the target platforms for Epic Mickey. Warren Spector, however, has since stated that he always wanted the game to be designed for a single platform to help narrow the focus, but once the Wii's monstrous success was brought up, decisions needed to be made. The reality is that we started Wii development in 2008, but before we were a PS3, PC, and 360 title. The Wii version needed to be its own game. A lot of the design ideas just wouldn't translate on it, and we needed to give the Wii its due. This is probably what spurred the paint and thinner mechanic that the game employed, taking inspiration from Mario Sunshine, the Wii remote IR sensor, and from Shigeru Miyamoto in general, who Spectre always cites as a massive influence. With this late game change into the design, shifting everything over to a very different system architecture, as well as a rather tight development schedule, are all contributing factors as to why Epic Mickey received a mixed response from fans. There were certainly some areas of the game that were a bit less polished than what was to be expected of the high standards that had been set. There was a lot of experimentation on Junction Point's part, like sussing out exactly how a 3D platformer should work in general, as most of the team had exclusively worked on first-person shooters up to that point. So, when Epic Mickey released in late November of 2010, it obviously had some baggage and a whole lot of hype to live up to, and it wound up being quite divisive in the end. Some players felt the concept, world, characters, and presentation to be so charming that the game's other aspects were excusable, while others still felt that the camera, its simplistic paint and thinner mechanic, and lack of voice acting hurt it too much to be recommended, especially compared to all the other platformers released on the Wii by 2010. Warren Spector nowadays seems pretty nonplussed by Mickey's reception. With the first game, we built a team, a studio, a world, a codebase, created characters, and figured out how to work with Disney. The fact that we made a game that touched so many people that way with all those obstacles is amazing to me. Now, we know who Mickey is. We now know who Oswald is. I got more fan mail about Epic Mickey than any game I've ever worked on. We connected to people in a way that games rarely ever do, so screw Metacritic, screw the gamers who didn't like our camera, screw everybody. I am really proud of that game, and I am really proud of the team that made it, and nothing is going to ever sway me from feeling like that was one of the high points of my career. Wow! Well, despite that mixed reception, Epic Mickey would go on to sell very well on Nintendo's machine, although some pointed out that the game releasing after Black Friday, a traditionally lucrative selling period, stunted its sales potential quite a bit. Regardless, very immediately, Disney had Junction Point launched directly into a sequel, Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two, featuring 2, which shockingly saw 2-player co-op being added, as well as voice acting and a revised camera. camera. So despite Spector's mantra of screw everybody, he clearly saw there was room to improve. That being said, this 2012 sequel was reviewed even more harshly than the first game, and despite it releasing on the PS3, Xbox 360, Wii U, PC, and the Vita, it still managed to sell worse than the Wii original. Maybe it was the divisive reaction to the first game that made the prospect of a sequel not all that enticing, or the fact that the generation was winding down, which limited its appeal. At the end of the day, the power of 2's sales were so dismal that Disney simply closed Junction Point down less than 2 months after its release, which, while surprising, was also not very surprising. This is because, precisely around that time period, Disney was famous for quickly purchasing studios like Propaganda and BlackRock, and then just as quickly shutting them down once profits started to take a dip. Warren Spector, in a bid to save the studio, offered to simply step down and leave Junction Point, giving up his high salary, which, while noble, was not enough to dissuade Disney from their intended course of action. Disney just wanted to move in a different direction, probably the right decision for them, frankly. No regrets. I had a great time with Disney. I'm totally happy to have worked for them and have made Epic Mickey. I'm super proud of the EM team. So, just like that, in the course of just a few short years, a seemingly slam dunk of an idea didn't quite leave the impact that was expected. The final product didn't wow everybody, was not in line with what some had expected, and was unpolished and rushed in a few key areas. That being said, Epic Mickey has subsequently been looked upon with a bit more fondness than when it was originally released. And that's the first Epic Mickey, mind you. I kinda doubt many fans bring up its sequel. But this might not be the end for Mickey Mouse and his attempts at being epic, as there are some strong rumors that the game might return in a remastered form. Play Magic, a studio currently working on a remaster of Ubisoft's spy-based FPS 13, have stated they are currently remaking a Disney-themed third-person action title since mid-2019, and even has such a listing up on their website. While there are certainly a few candidates that this could wind up being, it's a relatively safe bet that when it's finally announced, they'll be wearing a pair of mouse ears. As for Warren Spector, well, he floated around a bit after the closure of Junction Point and has subsequently found himself back where it all began, currently heading up development of System Shock 3.
Hackers.
Update: it seems like now System Shock 3 is nothing but a creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating, as most of the main developers at Other Side Entertainment, the studio behind it, have seemingly left, or were fired. It's kind of unclear. Spector joined Other Side in 2016 and was directing this sequel himself, but now it seems like the whole thing is hanging by a thread. If you saw my episode on Overkill's Walking Dead, you'd know that Starbreeze sold the publishing rights to System Shock 3 back to Other Side, who since then have failed to find a publisher who brought a decent deal to the table. Sad to see Spector's latest hit such a massive snag, but them's the breaks, I guess. Hope it works out, but I got my doubts. Now, it's certainly possible that Epic Mickey getting reintroduced to a whole new generation on modern systems will give it a good second chance, and hopefully some extra paint and polish that'll buff out some of the flaws of the original release. And that, my friends, is the full epic tale of what happened? So, if you know of any other malign mascots who meander in mediocrity, let me know in the comments below or splash some paint up on the Flophouse VIP Patreon to officially nominate the subject for a future episode of What Happened. See you next time, and thanks for watching.